Totally. Because they were close as brothers, they were best of friends, and out of all the actors and comedians I've written for, they're the only ones I used to put very few stage directions. With Paul and Barry, there was no way I had to tell them how to land a gag.
Get to that end. Come on. To there. To me. Down there. Here we go. I'm taking it through to you. To me. Hang on, it's not going to go through.
When you would see them in panto or doing their theatre tours, suddenly you saw what the best of musical would have been. And they were also great users of the custard pie in the theatre. And if Barry knew you were in, or any friends were in, he would try to find you in the audience.
So you've been custard pie by them?
Yes, there was a point where I did say, if you pie me today, I will nuke you tomorrow.
Ready? Hello. Wait, I swear you're the Chuckle Brothers. It must be in his. Nah, something's weird. Where's your ladders?
In the van. You're going to know. What now? Yes. Hang on, it's Ginger.
There are lots of catchphrases, isn't there?
Oh yes, you know, hello. I can't, with apologies to Paul, because I can't do it like that. And oh dear, oh dear. Now you never think oh dear would be a catchphrase. It was the way they said it. And from me to you.
There was a sort of innocence
Totally.
and a silliness, wasn't there?
Yes, and you were never going to hear anything that you shouldn't hear, or see anything that you shouldn't see.
And what sort of a character was Barry off stage?
He was very private. He was a quiet man. He loved his home and family.
And garden?
And gardening, yeah. And he was a meticulous man, because the wonderful thing about Barry is when he performed he was meticulous. He would lay out all his props himself to make sure they were there. And he was a meticulous gardener. And a friend of ours, John Sale, who was the greatest chuckle writer of them all, and he was with Barry in the garden, and Barry was pruning a conifer, and they went back into the house, and John just said, oh Barry, that branch out there is an inch off, and Barry raced outside with the shears.
A bit of a perfectionist then?
Totally, which is why he was so great and lovely.
The Chuckle Brothers, Barry Chuckle, has died aged 73. Now, June Jacobs was a leading Jewish campaigner who caused controversy by meeting representatives of the Palestine Liberation Organization. At the time, she was chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and calls for her resignation. June campaigned on many issues and was a tireless committee woman. She'd been born into a wealthy family and educated at Southampton High School in London. I asked her friend Rabbi Jeremy Gordon why she became a campaigner.
She was evacuated to the States as a child during the war, and I think when she came back there was always something slightly different, and there was a sort of carefree, perhaps sort of classically American thing about her. And then she married very, very well. She married Basil, who she loved dearly, and she didn't work, and I think that gave her a sense of security. She always felt she could do whatever she wanted because she felt under no threat from anybody. Nobody could sack her. And so she had this great start, tremendous intelligence, tremendous charm, and nothing to do. So she was sort of slowly drawn in, initially through an organisation called Jewish Child Day. She got involved increasingly in other organisations as she went through her. But I think it was those two things, really.
And she took up the cause of the Soviet Jews who were being refused permission to emigrate to Israel.
That was her first sort of huge contribution. Really, she set up this organisation called the National Council for Soviet Jewry. She was really struck at the way that Jews were being treated in Russia, and she made friends with all the great refuseniks of that age. And going back to the 1980s, there was a huge issue, certainly in Anglo Jewry, and they all knew her when they came out. Eventually, they all stayed in her house. She launched a hunger strike, a one-person hunger strike, and went to sit outside the Russian embassy. And she looked fantastic, always dressed immaculate, with beautiful hair, like a model, really, in front of this sort of sign, Free Soviet Jews, and it kind of caught the attention of the press.
What I hope is achieved is that those people in Russia, not just the 6 scientists, because they're doing this on behalf of their brothers who are all fighting for the right to normal human right to emigrate. I'm hoping that they will feel that we are there in solidarity to give them an extra boost, an extra courage, and a knowledge that we in the free world
stage where the Bolshoi ballet were performing, and she got hold of them and calmed them down, but then increased the heat in other places, and she could do that to people because they were moved whenever they met her.
And she was always coming at things from left of centre, wasn't she? She was really a social activist.
A socialist, social activist. She was very much from the left, and you know, the sorts of causes that were close to her heart, Jewish Council for Racial Equality, were all about the opportunities that the people who are on the fringes of society don't get.
There were controversial moments. She was the Foreign Affairs spokesman for the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and she met members of the Palestinian Liberation Organisation. That must have caused a huge fuss at the time, didn't it?
In 1989, she met Bassem Abu Sharif and subsequently went on to meet Yasser Arafat. And there wasn't anything like sort of an agreed sense that this was an important thing to do. But she felt very, very strongly that you don't make peace without talking to people that you disagree with. She pulled along with her the then president of the Board of Deputies, who was a very small-c conservative English judge, you know, who didn't like making waves. She was sort of famous for walking into the Board of Deputies, which is quite a sort of, you know, has a reputation of being slightly staid, you know, in pink. You know, Jenny Fraser wrote a wonderful obituary. She said not only was she sort of gorgeous and charming and a great star, but she had the temerity to be intelligent as well. And she just didn't mind being bold, being brave. She didn't mind disagreement if she felt it was the right thing to do, and she really did when it came. I mean, there were two things. One is she felt you need to make peace by talking to people who you're not feeling peaceful with. But the other thing is she felt very, very strongly that Palestinians should have self-determination, should have their own safe nation state within the kind of borders of the post-1967 controlled Israel.
But there were some deputies who thought she should resign.
Absolutely.
That, weren't there?
Yeah, she faced them down. There was a sort of, I think there was a major debate. People spoke, people argued that she should step down, and she refused to.
Because these meetings would have been illegal for an Israeli citizen, wouldn't they?
I think she said, well, you know, if it's good enough for the Prime Minister, it's good enough for us. But it was certainly in front of a wave that maybe we still haven't caught up to, even in 2018.
What do you think it was about her then that made her carry on standing up for the causes that she believed in?
I think she loved it. She loved to be asked to give a speech, and she would give great speeches, and she would go around the world. You know, she would speak at the United Nations on the rights of women, but also her heart kind of drove her. You could perhaps disagree with her, but you could never suggest that she was making anything up.
One of the other causes she took up was the rights of women in Orthodox marriages to get divorced.
As well as being a socialist, she was a proud feminist, and for decades involved in women's rights, and lit the way, I think, for the whole subsequent generations of women leaders within Anglo-Jewry and elsewhere. And this was, and to some extent still is, a black mark against Orthodox Judaism. I mean, I'm not an Orthodox rabbi. I'm the rabbi of the synagogue that she was a member of. And she would come up to me after services and place my hand in her hand, as she would do, and look kind of squarely in my eyes. And she would say, that was such a good sermon. You know, I did particularly like this, that, and the other. And what are you going to do about these women who can't get a divorce from their husbands? They were great arguments, and they were great fights, and, you know, we'll continue fighting on her behalf.
Rabbi Jeremy Gordon on June Jacobs, who's died aged 88. Now, Tommy Peoples was an award-winning Irish fiddle player and composer, described as legendary by the Irish president. He was a member of the Bothy Band and collaborated with many different musicians during his career. One of them was the singer and songwriter Paul Brady.
Tommy Peoples was brought up in a small village called St Johnston in County Donegal. It wouldn't be seen as the hottest bed of traditional music in the world, I suppose, that particular place, but he was exposed to traditional Irish music from a very early age and took to it like a duck to water, and immediately excelled at it. Although he came from Donegal, which has a very recognisable fiddle style, which is a lot of bow work and is played very fast and influenced quite a bit by Scottish dance music, he nonetheless had a feeling for all the different styles of music in Ireland and was able to play in almost any style you'd ask him to. And furthermore, I suppose he had his own style. He developed a style of playing the fiddle which among other things included a sort of a bouncing of the bow on the string that I had never heard before. The 9 points of roguery and Bannatyr. Those two tunes, to me, gave everything that Tommy had. The 9 points of roguery was a Donegal tune, but he kind of turned it into his own music. You know, anytime I hear that, it gives me delightful shivers. He was great fun, he was enthusiastic, and I was extremely in heaven when I played with his music, because although I have listened to lots of fiddle players, he was far and away my favourite. There isn't a fiddle player in the world that plays Irish music that isn't aware of Tommy Peebles. He was one of the best fiddle players there ever was of Irish music.
The playing of Tommy Peebles, who's died aged 70. This week you also heard last words on the activist Aiko Herzig Yoshinaga, the comedian Barry Chuckle, the campaigner June Jacobs, and the yachtsman Tony Bullymore. Don't forget, we're available as a podcast. Just search online or wherever you get your podcasts for BBC Last Word.
Which was presented by Matthew Bannister and produced by Paul Waters.
And what age are you?
47.
47?
Yeah.
Meet Tara and George.
45, 46 coming up. Tell the truth, I never thought I'd make it. I've got 25%.
Homeless in 2018.
For people living on the streets, the average age of death is 47. For women, it's even lower, just 43.
An intimate new 6-part series.
She won't marry me.
Did you ask her to marry you?
Yeah, but she won't tie me down.
Tara and George starts on Tuesday afternoon at 3 on BBC Radio 4.
The listener project is coming up just before the PM programme at 5 o'clock. Now though on Radio 4 it's time for feedback with Roger Bolton.
Hello, welcome to a rather different feedback this week. We're devoting the whole programme to a discussion about the BBC's coverage of foreign news in these quite extraordinary times, and we're doing so with the help of some of the corporation's top correspondents.
Here's another beauty.
It's a good line. Impartial, free and fair.
When the fate of a country as large as Russia, a nuclear power, depends on the escapology skills of its president, you can't help but hold your breath.
A new fault line has emerged in recent years. Social media. Cyber battles are now changing the age-old conflicts between the people in power and the power of the people.
Lise Doucette, the BBC's chief international correspondent, is joining us from London. Steve Rosenberg, the BBC's correspondent in Moscow, joins us from there. And John Sopel is in Washington. Welcome to you all. Well, we built this as a discussion on the challenges of being a foreign correspondent in these extraordinary times, when, for example, in the so-called bastion of democracy, the president calls journalists enemies of the people. John Sopel, how dangerous, how extraordinary do you think these times are?
Well, they're certainly unusual, and it's not kind of exactly a pleasure to be called an enemy of the people, which Donald Trump has now done.